The Young and the Restless. Spoilers. Wednesday, full September 24, 2025. The storm gathering over Genoa City seemed to reach across every family, every alliance, and every rivalry. And as always, the Abbotts found themselves at the center of the turbulence. Abbott Communications had collapsed under the weight of reckless ambition, bad timing, and the clash of egos that had driven the company's leadership to ruin, leaving Billy Abbott both restless and dangerous. For Billy, failure was intolerable. It lit up the darker corners of his nature, driving him to lash out, to push others into corners so he could feel in control again. Sally Spectra became his chosen target, the woman he saw as both a partner in ambition and a tether to something worth holding onto. Yet in Billy's world, partnership rarely meant equality. It meant pressure, expectation, and manipulation. He pressed Sally relentlessly, demanding she pick a side, that she declare not only her loyalty in business but her loyalty in love. The collapse of Abbott Communications had taught him nothing about patience, and his obsession with proving himself left Sally suffocated under the weight of his need. Sally, however, was not the same woman who had once scrambled for scraps of opportunity in Genoa City. Hardened by failures, sharpened by betrayals, and emboldened by her ability to survive even the most humiliating setbacks, she looked at Billy's demands with a growing clarity. His power had waned, his influence compromised, and his family itself seemed more preoccupied with containing him than supporting him. Jack and Diane hovered constantly in the background, trying to rein him in, pulling strings quietly to prevent his reckless impulses from tearing apart the Abbott legacy further. Yet Billy remained blind to their interventions, convinced that he alone could steer his fate. To Sally, that blindness was a warning. No matter how deeply she cared for him, no matter how much their connection once burned with possibility, Billy's self-destructive patterns might consume her unless she cut herself free. The question lingered like a knife at her side: was she willing to walk away, to preserve herself even if it meant breaking what little remained between them? Amid this turmoil, Sally turned to Audra Charles, a woman who knew better than most what it meant to lose everything. Audra's professional world had collapsed spectacularly, her position at the Bronte gone, her grip on Newman Media shattered, and her once promising romance with Nate Hastings reduced to ashes. For Audra, the ruins of her career were not an end but a crucible, and standing beside Sally, she began to envision something beyond survival. Both women had been underestimated, manipulated, and cast aside by men who believed they could control them. Now, with nothing left to lose, they entertained the dangerous but exhilarating idea of building something entirely their own. The fall of Abbott Communications did not have to spell the end of their ambition. It could be the beginning of a new empire, a company forged not out of legacy but out of resilience and rebellion. Sally's quiet fire and Audra's ruthless edge could fuse into something formidable, and though the logistics remained uncertain, the conversation itself was enough to shift their perspective from despair to defiance. But Genoa City is never kind to women on the rise, and already the fractures in these new plans were exposed. Billy, sensing Sally's withdrawal, doubled down on his pursuit, pressing her not only to define her role in their business ventures but to clarify their personal relationship. His ultimatum, disguised as a question, forced her to confront what she had been avoiding. Could she truly build a future tethered to a man who thrived on chaos? Jack and Diane watched this drama unfold with quiet dread, knowing that Billy's downward spiral was as much a threat to their family's reputation as it was to Sally's well-being. If Sally rejected him, it could send him into another destructive spiral. If she stayed, she risked being dragged down with him. Elsewhere, Lauren Fenmore's sharp instincts turned toward her husband, Michael Baldwin, and what she perceived as his increasingly secretive behavior. Michael's loyalty to the Newman family had always complicated their marriage, and now whispers of ulterior motives circulated around town, raising the possibility that he was withholding truths even from her. Lauren's questions were not gentle, they were pointed, demanding, the kind of questions that stripped away the comforts of partnership and forced Michael to confront whether his alliances were threatening the very foundation of his marriage. For a woman who had endured betrayal before, Lauren's suspicions were not paranoia but survival. If Michael was hiding something, she would uncover it, and her demand for answers placed another crack in the intricate web of trust binding Genoa City's most powerful players together. Meanwhile, Audra, stripped of professional armor and cast adrift in the wreckage of her career, turned her personal bitterness into a weapon against Carl Abbott. Carl had once been a complication, an ally, and even a temptation, but now he became the target of her scorn. Every word she spoke to him was laced with venom, every encounter designed to provoke, to needle, to remind him of what she believed he had lost in choosing another path. For Audra, cruelty was not merely vengeance, it was control, the reclaiming of a sense of power in a world that had stripped her of it. Kyle, already reeling from the collapse of his father's company and the ongoing chaos in his personal life, found himself the unwilling target of her barbs. The question was not whether he would react, but how. Would he let her scorn slide off him like water? Or would her relentless needling spark the Abbott temper that lay just beneath his carefully measured exterior? The week ahead in Genoa City promised no easy answers. Sally's heart and ambition stood at a crossroads, with Billy pulling her one way and her own instincts urging another. Audra's alliance with Sally hinted at the birth of something new and dangerous, but her hostility toward Carl threatened to ignite yet another front in the Abbott-Newman wars. Lauren's questions for Michael promised to stir domestic unrest even as professional battles loomed, and in the middle of it all, Billy's recklessness threatened to tip the balance between salvation and ruin. The collapse of Abbott Communications was not the end of a story but the beginning of a new, volatile chapter, one where love, loyalty, and ambition would be tested in ways that no one, least of all the Abbott school, predict. Genoa City's undercurrents were once again alive with secrets, power plays, and the ever-looming specter of betrayal. Lauren Fenmore, ever astute and never one to ignore her instincts, was beginning to feel the weight of something unsettling hanging over her marriage to Michael Baldwin. Their relationship had always been founded on mutual respect and trust, but lately, Lauren's sharp eye had noticed subtle shifts in Michael's behavior. There was something he wasn't saying, something that wasn't sitting right with her. She'd learned over the years to trust her gut, and now it was screaming at her that Michael was hiding something. The rumors around town suggested that Michael had been re-engaged by Victor Newman, working quietly behind the scenes on a project too secretive to share with her. It was impossible to ignore the late-night phone calls, the hushed conversations, and the times when Michael seemed distracted, almost as though his loyalties had shifted away from their shared life and toward a dangerous partnership with the very man who had caused so much chaos in their past. Lauren's suspicions had a sharp edge. She knew that Victor had a history of pulling Michael back into his schemes, exploiting his intellect and his moral flexibility for his own gain. But to know that Michael might be secretly working for Victor again after everything they had gone through, after all the betrayal they had suffered, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The only question that remained was whether Michael would come clean or whether Lauren's own detective work would push him to reveal the truth. The confrontation, when it came, would be inevitable. If Michael had indeed been monitoring Kane Ashby on behalf of the mustache, Lauren would need to confront him, and she would not let him sidestep her questions. But would Michael admit to his role, or would he continue to deceive her, thinking that his silence could protect them both? Meanwhile, Kane Ashby, whose life had been torn apart by corporate maneuvering and shifting allegiances, found himself standing at a crossroads of his own making. The alliance he had once forged with Victor Newman was beginning to show cracks, and Kane realized that the time had come to sever ties with one of his key partners. He had been playing a dangerous game, moving between the Newmans and other power players in Genoa City, but the consequences of his actions were beginning to catch up with him. He could feel the pressure mounting from every direction, and the weight of Victor's ambition had begun to feel like an anchor pulling him down. Kane was tired of being a pawn in Victor's quest for dominance and revenge, and it seemed inevitable that he would soon choose to cut ties with someone he once thought could be a useful ally. As Kane wrestled with his next steps, Holden Novak emerged from the shadows, ever the mysterious figure lurking just outside the main stage of the drama. Holden, a man who had his own tangled history with Claire Newman, saw an opportunity to exploit her vulnerability. He suggested she come with him to Los Angeles, promising her a fresh start away from the chaos of Genoa City. The invitation was both an offer of escape and an insinuation of deeper motives, and Claire couldn't help but wonder if Holden's interests were as purely about her well-being as he made them seem. Would she go with him, or was this another attempt at manipulation? Claire was at a crossroads herself, caught between her loyalty to the Newman family and her growing doubts about the men she had allowed into her life. Holden's proposition was tempting in its simplicity, but Claire knew better than to trust someone who had so easily become entangled in her family's complex web of deceit. In the midst of all this, Victor Newman was facing a war of his own. His long-standing rivalry with Jack Abbott had entered yet another heated phase, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. Victor had long been a master of strategy, but his greatest moves often involved alliances that could be as fragile as they were dangerous. Nikki had suggested that it was time to make peace with Jack, if only to put aside their personal animosities and join forces against a common enemy, Kane Ashby. But Victor, ever the schemer, had no intention of simply letting bygones be bygones. Despite Nikki's entreaties, he was far from ready to settle any scores with Jack. Instead, he issued an ultimatum to Kane, demanding that he join forces with Victor in a full-scale assault on Abbott and Jack's hold on the company. Kane's refusal to comply set off a chain of events that led to an even more dangerous proposition. Would Victor make a temporary truce with Jack in order to take down Kane? Would the man who had always refused to compromise finally admit that some battles required an alliance, even with an enemy? As Victor's plans began to unfold, Nikki's worry grew. She had made the suggestion to Victor with the best of intentions, hoping that a ceasefire between the two men would allow them to tackle a larger issue: Kane Ashby's dangerous rise to power. But now Nikki wondered if her husband was playing a much longer game, one that might involve more ruthless tactics than she could stomach. Would Victor give in to his pride and make peace with Jack, or would his personal vendetta against Kane blind him to the possibility of a true alliance? As the days passed, Nikki found herself caught between the man she loved and the dangerous power struggle unfolding before her eyes. Nikki's surprise at the twists in Victor's plans were compounded by another shocking revelation. She would receive unexpected news that would alter the course of everything she had hoped for. Could it be possible that Victor was seriously considering a temporary truce with Jack, or was this just another of his many strategic moves designed to keep everyone on edge? For now, the only certainty was that the winds of change were blowing through Genoa City, and no one, not even the Newmans, could predict where they would land. The rhythm of Genoa City always seemed to intensify when Kane Ashby was at the center of a scheme, and this time, the stage he chose was no boardroom or discreet back alley but a private rail journey where he could press his agenda with a clarity that left no room for doubt. The sound of steel wheels clattering along the tracks underscored his words as he told Billy Abbott that there were too many variables in play, too many moving parts, and that his own exit from certain entanglements had been final. Kane's tone carried both warning and weariness, a signal that he was cutting off an alliance and leaving Billy to manage his own demons. Billy, however, never accepted abandonment with grace. His face darkened with the bitterness that had become his second skin, and though he muttered a few venom-laced hints rather than a direct threat, the implication was clear: he was not done, and Kane had not seen the last of him. The train ride ended not with resolution but with the tension of two men walking away from each other while knowing their unfinished business would echo back at them soon. Kane, unsettled by the encounter, recognized immediately that Billy's volatility posed a threat to everything he was trying to secure. Billy's obsession with revenge had the potential to unravel plans meticulously laid out, and that made him dangerous. Kane decided to neutralize that risk in the most pragmatic way he knew how: by sending Michael Baldwin to confront Billy and rein him in. Michael's loyalty to Victor was one matter, but his usefulness to Kane lay in his ability to exert pressure, to manipulate the narrative in ways others could not. As Kane issued the order, his mind raced with contingency plans, each one designed to make sure Billy's downward spiral did not compromise the larger game he was playing. Michael, caught between obligations to Victor, to Kane, and to his own sense of self-preservation, accepted the task with grim efficiency. While this machinery of manipulation churned, Kane crossed paths with Phyllis Summers, and what began as a casual exchange quickly turned into a surprising alignment of perspectives. Both had been dismissed, underestimated, and painted as schemers more than once, and both understood the sting of betrayal as well as the intoxication of being underestimated. Their conversation unfolded like a dance, subtle, strategic, yet laced with the possibility of something more personal. By the time they had finished sharing their grievances and ambitions, the idea of dinner together no longer seemed indulgent but inevitable. They decided on Society, the restaurant that had become a magnet for the intersecting dramas of Genoa City, and Kane knew the choice was not just about food but about being seen. At the same time, Tracy Abbott was preparing to meet Amy Lewis, only for her plans to shift when a last-minute message informed her that Amy needed to reschedule. The disappointment was fleeting, replaced almost immediately by opportunity, for Tracy found herself with time to sit and reflect at Society. It was there, seated at the bar, that Michael found her after failing to sway Billy away from his vendetta. Their conversation unfolded with the quiet intimacy of two people who had seen too many battles to be surprised by the latest one. Michael, frustrated by Billy's stubbornness, confessed his concern that revenge was consuming the younger Abbott, while Tracy listened with the patience that only years of surviving her family's storms could provide. She reminded him gently but firmly that Billy's choices were his own, though the fallout would inevitably touch them all. As the two of them spoke, the door opened to admit Kane and Phyllis, an unlikely pair that drew immediate attention. Their arrival was not subtle. They walked with the ease of people who had just discovered they had more in common than the town would ever guess. The sight of them together, heading toward the bar, set tongues wagging even before they reached Tracy and Michael's table. The collision of these four-figures, Tracy, Michael, Kane, and Phyllis at Society's bar promised a new and unexpected chapter in the already tangled web of Genoa City's alliances. Unspoken questions hung heavy in the air. Would Kane flaunt his new partnership with Phyllis as a provocation? Would Tracy confront him about Billy? And would Michael's divided loyalties finally snap into focus as the weight of every secret began to converge in one public moment?